Today we're going to be looking at the Jende 1" by 6" 6 micron resin bonded diamond stone. Say that 10 times fast. You can currently pick a stone up for around $65. I paid for this stone with my own money, but I will leave links to it in the description and in the pinned comment below. Now 6 micron is around the 3000 grit range, and that is, in my opinion, the perfect grit range to get into resin bonded diamond stones. The reason that that is the case is because for a lot less money, you can get away with something like this, the SHARPAL 325 1200 grit, and you can jump right from the 1200 grit side to a 3000 grit resin bonded diamond stone without any troubles whatsoever. You don't need coarser grits on the more expensive resin bonded diamond stones, unless of course that's just something that you want. In order to get both of the coarser grits in plated stones, you're going to be spending well over $120. Whereas you can buy a cheaper plated stone for around the $60 to $70 mark. So with that out of the way, let's take a closer look at this stone and I'll show you exactly what it does. First off, this stone cuts well, has decent feedback, and even though it loads up somewhat, that loading doesn't seem to impact its cutting ability. The loading wipes off and the stone simply cuts again. And it puts very good edges on knives. Taking this Rex 45 sent to me by Venev knives right from the stone to a 6 micron strop left me with some very crisp edges. Jende 6 micron resin bonded diamond stone and a 6 micron outdoors 55 strop and compound. A lot of people claim that it's not possible to do that with a 6 micron strop, and there it is. Main thing is that you just need to have a quality steel. This is CPM Rex 45. Sent to me by Venev knives. Bang! So looking at the stone up close, I can see some larger particles within the matrix. I wouldn't call this crazy grit contamination by any means because they're not that much larger than other surrounding particles. But there are some larger particles hanging around. Now, I can only see these larger particles, scratches, when magnifying to a crazy degree. So, all in all, I'd say it's almost hardly worth mentioning, but I am mentioning it because I can see them in the diamond resin matrix. Now, you really can't see these larger scratches till you really zoom in, and I probably shouldn't even be bringing it up since it won't impact performance or grit progression in any way, shape, or form. It's really a non-issue, but you can see it in the pictures, so we're talking about it. Now, I don't think we can talk about this stone without talking about the Venev 1200, which is more like a 3500 grit on the same scale. On paper, these two stones are very close. Now, the Jende 6 micron is slightly coarser than the Venev 1200, but they both have a very similar feel and feedback to them. I mean, if I was blindfolded, I'd have a very hard time telling the difference between these two stones. In real life, though, the Jende 6 micron is slightly coarser than the Venev 1200. But one thing you may notice with the Venev 1200 is there is some grit contamination that can be seen in the scratch pattern. So with this grit contamination, even though the Venev is a slightly finer stone, I think it behaves more like the Jende 6 micron. So it really is a toss-up, in my opinion, between these two stones. So off the cuff here, sometimes these reviews, they put me in a tough spot because here we are at the end of this review and the Jende stone is 100% legit. I would 100% recommend this stone to anybody. It's going to do exactly what it says it's going to do. It has great feel. It has great feedback. Maybe it has a slight loading issue, but pretty much any stone over the 3000 grit mark is going to load somewhat. These stones, they cut well, especially with those high carbide, high hardness steels, and you're not going to go wrong picking up this stone. Now here's where this review kind of puts me in a tough spot, because on one hand, we talked about two stones in this review, and on paper and even in person, they're almost identical in terms of how they're going to perform when sharpening a knife. Yes, one of them may have a little bit more grit contamination than the other one, but does that actually matter when it comes down to how sharp you're going to be able to get your knife? And the answer is no. In real life, none of that matters. I think what it really comes down to in terms of which one would I recommend buying is availability and price. Where I live, I can get the Jende stones slightly cheaper than the Venevs. Now, I think this all depends on where you live and the availability. The Jende stones also also seem to have a little bit better availability than the Venevs. The Venevs sometimes seem to be hit or miss. A lot of times they're out of stock. The Jende stones, I think that these are relatively new stones, but right now the availability seems to be pretty good. They're available everywhere, especially on Amazon, and they don't mark up the price on Amazon like they do on the Venev. So you're probably going to be able to pick this Jende stone up for a little bit cheaper. And right now, this is the one I'd recommend. All else being equal, and I think that these stones are, the Venevs are some of my absolute favorite resin bonded diamond stones, or they were. I think I'm going to switch over to saying that the Jende stones are probably going to be my favorite. They just maybe have that tiny slight little edge over the Venevs in feel and feedback. But again, if you picked up a Venev or own a Venevs, they're almost identical stones. Again, if I was blindfolded, I really have a hard time telling them apart. So I do want to jump in here real quick because I know this is going to come up, but the Venevs can be bought from the Gritomatic website for cheaper than Amazon, and the current price there is $67.50 for the 1200. So technically it is still a little bit more expensive. I tend to get things quicker on Amazon than I tend to get things super quick ordering on Amazon. So it's kind of, again, dependent on where you live. Those are my closing arguments for these stones. I would recommend these stones for anybody who has high carbide and or high hardness steel. If you have a combination of both of those, CPM M4 is a good example, S110V is a good example, Rex 45 is a good example. If you're sharpening those very high hardness and or very high, something like vanadium carbide steels, you're probably you're really gonna want to go with diamond stones. And if you want the higher grits, you're gonna have to go with a resin bonded or metal bonded or something like that diamond stone. The plated stones go up to about 1,000 grit, and that's the cutoff point. You can't get those any higher than about 1,000, 1,200 grit. These stones put an amazing finish on your knives, and it's really the only way to get that high end, the high grit finishes on those particular steels. So that's my recommendation on these stones, and hopefully that message came across correctly. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video/review.